love is the way forward, and with time, forgiveness. And that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but like until I'm willing to like try and see it from a higher perspective, I'm just in a cage. I cannot afford resentments or judgment, because if I'm in a space of resentfulness or judgmentalism, the sunlight of the spirit is blocked and I'm wrapped up in myself again, right back in the middle of my life.
One of the big problems in society these days is that we confuse success and happiness. We kind of think they're the same thing. But it's really clear to me that they are two separate things. You can have them both, but getting one doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the other one.
Yeah.
And I think of you in 2011 when your debut album came out, smash hit, right? Doing really, really well.
Yeah.
Yet in interviews, I've heard you refer back to that period, saying that you weren't happy. Successful on one hand, but at the same time, not happy. So how do you see those two things?
Yeah, it's something I speak about a lot with my friends in the studio and with other artists. And I'm aware that I'm saying this from a place of coming from privilege and being comfortable and having had relative commercial success through, you know, being signed to Dirty Hit and the music I've put out over the years. But my experience is, as cheesy as it sounds, like I think success is happiness. And true happiness in the soul, you know what I mean? A feeling of contentment in one's heart. And if, you know, I have friends who I won't name, people who've been in very successful bands who've touring the world, selling out shows, and, you know, have taken their own life when they get home. And I can only speak for myself. And it's a conversation I have a lot with young artists I'm lucky enough to work with and learn from. But really the juice is to try and care for one's own spirit with whatever program or methodology one uses, and get it into a place where like the spirit can be in the same place, whether the record sells 1 million copies or sells 1 copy, or whether you have a big record deal or a small record deal or no record deal or 1 record deal. And you know, my experience is that I'm most happy and content when I'm around other human beings talking about stuff that matters to me, or sharing common solutions, and not when I'm in front of loads of people playing shows and having praise thrown my way. That stuff's nice sometimes, but I can't tell you the amount of times I've come off stage at a festival and, you know, been crying in my porta cabin, that feeling of a hole in my heart, you know. And that's probably just my own stuff, you know, that I continue to work on. But I agree that, you know, I mean, really, you know, I'm not a millionaire, but like, what's the difference if some, you know, a big, massive rock star's got 100 million in the bank or whatever, or 1 billion? What's the difference? Your own plane, more space to walk around in a big lonely house, not being able to go anywhere without being photographed, having what you say taken out of context, not knowing really what a lover or a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or however anyone identifies might want from you in a romantic sense. You know, it's like, I don't know, I'm in a sick kind of way, and maybe I'm in denial about this. I'm kind of pleased that I never really got like street famous.
Yeah. What was it like in 2011? So first album comes out, you're doing really well. As you say, you're reflecting back now, what, 10 years on?
Yeah, it's just about 10 years, yeah.
Oh, well, incredible. So 10 years on.
Thanks.
Obviously, it's a very formative period in anyone's life. You know, I think you were, how old were you when the first album?
21, that
yeah,
kind of age.
I mean, 21 to early 30s, it's a very significant period in anyone's life. And it's interesting to hear you speak now that, you know, those things, whether you're getting adulation, whether the record sells a million or it sells 1 copy, shouldn't really matter. Did it matter back then?
Yeah, it did. It did, and it was never enough, because I remember being a 16, 17-year-old kid going to see like Fionn Regan playing like 150 cap folk theatre in Yorkshire, and thinking like, you know, that feeling when you're like young and you see a band on stage in like a small club and you're like, they've got it. You know what I mean? If I ever get there, I'll be... I remember being with my first ever girlfriend on a bus going through Manchester and seeing like a a tiny poster of an artist called Peter Broderick, who signed to Bella Union at the time, and it's a label and an artist that I love, and thinking, it's kind of, I am self-centered in a way, you know, thinking, oh my God, if I ever saw myself on a poster, I'd be so happy. And then sure enough, I get there, I'm playing those venues and bigger within 6 months, and I'm like irritable, restless, discontent in my own skin, and constantly living in the delusion that she'll fix me, or he'll fix me, or that'll fix me, or I'll sip that and that'll fix me, or more praise will fix me, or the next royalty check will fix me, you know. And it was never my experience, if that makes sense. But it did matter back then. I think I'd be lying if I said it didn't. And I have to remember that now when I'm talking to young artists, if they're like posting about themselves on social media or asking me for favors or this or that, I'm like, I have to remember that I was also that guy, you know. And it's important to be hungry and, you know, kind of be like, hey, will you manage me, or send your demos to a label, or, you know.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because, you know, what do they say? Youth is wasted on the young. Like, there's so much that we know more, if we understand more about life as we get older. And in some ways, we kind of wish we knew it back then. But in some ways, I think it's just part of the journey. You kind of got to go through it to understand it. You said something, Ben, which really caught my ear a minute ago, which you said it's probably just my own stuff that I'm dealing with. But I don't think it is. I think it's universal. I think pretty much all of us have a hole in our hearts, and we seek to fill that hole with whatever we can. And the question is, are we choosing things to fill it that are going to start really, you know, filling it for good? Or are we filling it with like quicksand, that we just get a temporary kind of, oh yeah, that feels better, but then it just seeps right through, and that hole then becomes even bigger, I think, than it was before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think the problem is when for me at least, I can only speak for myself, you know, I got into the habit of filling that hole in my heart with stuff that I was allergic to, you know, and didn't last. And I'm still in the business of trying to fill that hole in my heart, but I fill it with not stuff that I try, and I'm not perfect, you know, I'm only human, but I try and fill it with stuff that isn't gonna kill me or harm those around me directly or indirectly, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we are talking about at the moment is universal. Whether it's you when you're 21 wanting to sell more records and play bigger gigs, or whether it's someone starting out or in their job who wants a promotion, or who wants to earn a bit more so they can get a bigger car or a nicer house or a flashier holiday. It's actually the same underlying drive. We think that's going to make us happy, but it doesn't. It doesn't. I want to be really clear that I get it. If you've got nothing, you know, more money is going to, you know, give you food and shelter, right? I get that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just simply saying that once we have those basic needs met, the research is pretty clear on this, that more money is not really leading to happiness. And I think what we can say is that money can often eliminate some of the causes of unhappiness, but I'm not sure money in and of itself gives us happiness.
Yeah. I think it's a really common misconception that wanting to be secure or have more or be warm or eat or wanting to have sex or be in love or grow, have more comfort, security, wealth even. I think it's a misconception that stuff is a sin. You know, I think they're very human, natural desires that everyone has, and I don't think there's anything wrong with them at all. Again, I can only speak for myself, that the measure of when those desires, how I would put it, get defective or harmful is when they separate from their intended purpose, and I start putting them right in the middle of my life. I put myself right in the middle of my life, and they become my entire goal of like, I want to get more money, or I want to get more famous, or I want to get more sex, or I want to get more this or that or whatever, you know. And the work that I try and do myself is just to stay right-sized without being cruel to myself. There's nothing wrong with wanting, I want to get a new sofa, cool. Like, I want to get a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, like, cool. I don't think those things are sinful or evil at all. But I think some people, for whatever reason, and I consider myself one of these people, kind of those, what I would say, kind of God-given instincts, for whatever reason, run rampage, and chaos can followed in my experience.
I was reading the press release for your upcoming album, which, as we record this conversation, I think is out in about, what day are we on? Friday today? 1 week.
Yeah, 1 week.
In 1 week to go,
yeah.
right? So we'll definitely get to that, because I've heard 2 of the tracks so far. I can't wait for the album to come out next Friday.
Thank you.
And they are sublime, beautiful. They're just so good. But it said in the press release that this is the first album that you've written being sober. And I want to explore that a bit, because, why don't we start at the beginning? What were the problems you were facing? Maybe tell us a little bit about that, and sort of where it started and where we are now.
I think the main problem I was facing was from about 23, 24, I really wanted to stop taking drugs and drinking, and I couldn't. I made every kind of promise in the world. I went to every therapist, read every self-help book, tried new partners, moved to the other side of the world, threw drugs or alcohol into the river or onto the roofs of hotels to try and get rid of it, and would quickly be out there kind of picking it up again, or calling whoever to get my fix. And my problem was really that I was irritable, restless, discontent in my own skin, unless I had those kind of things in me to fill that hole in my heart. And it was, I went through my life like a tornado. I wasn't present for the people I loved. Like, I was emotionally absent from my own life and the lives of most people I met. And I really, whenever I'd be traveling to new places around the world or on tour or whatever, I wouldn't be able to function without certain things. So I'd say the problem was the kind of the hole in my soul, and I just kept trying to fill that. And I knew that what I was feeling I was allergic to, but just knowing it wasn't enough to get me to stop, until I reached a place of what I would describe as a bottom, in which I had nowhere else to kind of turn emotionally other than to ask for help from a kind international fellowship of human beings who shared with me their common solution that I try and practice one day at a time to keep me away from putting that stuff in my system that I'm allergic to. And through doing that, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink or a drug for well over 3 years.
First of all, thank you for sharing that. Congratulations on over 3 years. That's wonderful. You said allergic. When you say allergic, do you mean medically allergic, or do you mean sort of metaphorically allergic?
I mean, allergic in the sense that once I start, I can't stop. Once I put one in me, I trigger a craving, and I cannot stop until I'm so messed up that I, pass out or whatever, and then I wake up and I can't stay stopped. I forget the kind of suffering and humiliation of 12 hours or a week or a month or a year ago, and I start again. And so I would describe it as like the problem centers in my mind, and that's where I try and apply, a spiritual solution to build a defense against that first one that will trigger the allergy, and trigger that craving. And I'm not an angel. There are many other things that are not drugs or alcohol that people get, sugar. You know what I mean? We were talking about before we turned the camera on, man. Like if I get my hands on a box of wagon wheels, they're not sticking around very long. You know what I'm saying? And that stuff can be deadly for sure, you know, and that stuff I have to continue to work on. And I don't believe that drugs or alcohol are inherently evil and that no one should take them. And I know many people who can have great times using those things and can go out on a weekend and enjoy and then go to work on Monday and put it down and not be obsessing about it. But I'm not that guy, you know, nor do I think that I have a monopoly on recovery or the solution to alcoholism or drug addiction.
Would you mind sharing what sort of drugs you were taking?
Alcohol, skunk, and prescription pills mixed together, and other things as well that weren't my favorites.
Yeah. You spoke about being 23, and I'm interested as to when do you think this started?
I think I've always felt that kind of hole in the soul, sense of separation, apart from the world, otherness from long before I discovered alcohol and drugs. I think I've always been, you know, I remember being like 9 years old and playing like Halo on the Xbox, just like not wanting to stop. You know, I'd walk home from school and just play games or watch horror films or, you know, compulsive eating, that kind of stuff. So I think I've always had that ism, that kind of I, self, me of alcoholism from as far back as I can remember, really. Codependent, kind of romantically obsessed. I don't know. I'm not I really care about the solution and trying to live in that. I don't know whether I was born with it or something happened, and nor do I want to sit in like a pity party, like kind of pour me another drink mentality, because that's not good for me, you know. And my instinct is that I was from before I can consciously remember things. I feel like I had that that feeling of just like and a quick way to numb out that feeling is to do those things that I was describing, you know.
It's interesting. Are you familiar with Gabor Mate's work?
Of course, yeah. He's a legend.
Yeah, I mean, I love Gabor, and I've spoken to him a couple of times before on the show. We're going to speak again in a couple of months, I think. And
amazing.
You know, I like his broader definition of addiction, because I think society has had this view of addiction. Oh, you know, drug addicts on the street corner, you know, or the sort of overt alcoholic who can't function in life and, you know, has had to sell their house. You know, these kind of really extreme examples. And I think we like to make ourselves feel a bit better that, oh, you know, I'm not one of them.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm not an addict. And, you know, I know in an interview when I was researching you this morning, you've said we live in an addicted world. And, you know, Gabor's definition, I think, has sort of three key components. It's it's when we crave something and get a reward from it. It's something that we can't give up. And the third component is where we can't give it up in spite of negative consequences. And once you start broadening out to that, I think it's very hard for many of us to make a case that we all don't have some form of addiction, whether it is, you know, shopping, sex, Instagram, binge watching, you know, whatever it might be, coffee. We were chatting about that before, you know, as well as heroin and cocaine and whatever. You know, I think, and what I love about Gabor's approach is, and it's something I completely subscribe to, it's a much more compassionate approach, you know, not why the addiction, why the pain. And as I think about that and think of you, and I again, I want to be totally respectful of where you are in your journey and what you want to talk about. You know, it doesn't sound as though you were using drugs at the age of 9, right? You were doing that later, and alcohol. But I'm getting the impression that you were sort of felt you were drawn to just chuck yourself into things? Like, would you sort of numb out to computer games? Is that how you describe it?
Totally, to computer games or, like food, obsessing over girls, porn, video games, anything, anything to change the way I felt. And there were consequences at that young age a little bit, but it was more when I kind of got into the realms of being an adult and was just, if I'd have met you like 4 or 5 years ago and I'd have come to do this, I'd have been, using in your garden, and like I'd have been looking in your eyes thinking like, when's he going to stop talking so I can go and do my own thing? Whether it was you or anyone else, whether it was you or a label head or an artist or anyone, just very self-centered, and that's not because I don't feel like I became, an alcoholic because I drank or used obsessively or excessively. I think I drank and used obsessively and excessively because I am an alcoholic, and that stuff was the solution to my problem, which is life itself. When I get into recovery, I get surrendered by the bottle or by the bag, and then I think that that's my problem, and I put it down, and I feel worse than I did when I was high, and then I become surrendered by life itself, and I try and pick up some suggestions that other human beings have put in my path to try and get out of the way of myself and live a life beyond my wildest dreams, one day at a time if I put in the work.
How did fame at 21 affect this, would you say? Because, like, I don't know, there's a certain spotlight then that gets put on people, the certain magnification of pressure. I'm not convinced anymore that these things then start afresh. I sort of feel very, very strongly, and I've said this during the last 12, 15 months as well, where people have had to live in very different ways to what they used to, that, whether it's the restrictions or it's fame or public exposure, I feel it's stress testing the system. It's putting more pressure in, and it exposes like pre-existing faults. I don't mean fault in a blame way, but pre-existing cracks that were already there. I feel it just turns the gauge up so that you can start to expose those. I don't know how that sits with you in terms of what happened.
In answer to your question of like how did I find fame and success at 21 or those kind of arenas and what it brought up for me, I think it made me seem to the outside world very functional, and like bar the people who were very close to me, romantic partners or tour managers or promoters or the record label, were well aware that there were problems and what on the receiving end of a lot of my kind of nastiness. And but I was sat after I put out my first album. We toured it for 3 years and then finished touring that in like end of 2013 maybe, and for 3 or 4 years I was sat in in an expensive flat in the middle of London by myself with a hole in my heart, filling it with the stuff I'm allergic to, and I think it was hard. It was maybe hard for my own ego and judgment, that judgment that you were talking about, like, well, I'm not on a park bench homeless drinking a bottle of cheap, do you know what I mean? I'm not doing this drug or that drug or whatever. It's the one thing that separated me from starting to live in the solution was my own judgments. I'm not going to go and sit in a church basement with a load of, very judgmental. And actually, it's exactly where I needed to be. But in answer to your question, I think I found it weird. I think in terms of like the little bits of fame, like people coming up to you and like, oh, hey, like I love your stuff. I hope and I think I was always in that realm, gracious with people and like, thank you, I really appreciate that. I really love music, and it was wild to be like knocking around with artists that I'd loved my whole life and becoming friends with people and all that kind of stuff. I think when someone's young and they get suddenly have a relatively big publishing deal or record deal or success, then they're not, no one's trained them to like be like responsible with like money or time or these kind of things. It's like, that's what happens with art, is you kind of get this block of an advance or whatever. And it's like, oh, so I think that's kind of difficult. I think that's where good managers and compassionate, honest, fiscally assiduous managers are important to help guide artists in those realms. But the main thing I think was just that I was like, nothing's wrong with me. I'm killing it. I'm amazing. Everyone loves my music, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Very outwardly functional. Like I said, sat in a flat in the middle of London with everyone's, I remember being sat in a flat with my friend Cindy. She works for Sony in New York. She texted me. She's like, your song Shine is the most repeat played song in the whole world on Spotify this year. And it just, the whole world, I just went, it's like in one ear and out the other. I was like, thanks, man. Back to doing whatever I was doing, not present and escaping and totally powerless.
It's interesting that, the theme of judgment, judging other people for the way they're sort of dealing with their addictions. But that ain't me. I'm in my, I've got a big single, I'm getting my nice pads, and we can tell ourselves so many stories about our lives, and I can guarantee, Ben, that there will be hundreds of people listening right now who are in the same position, and what you just shared probably was like straight to their heart, and they thought, you know what, that's kind of me. Maybe not with the big album and the big song and that, do you know what I mean? But their version of that in their life,
sure,
man, it's there. It's everywhere. Everywhere you look, that stuff is there.
Yeah, and I hope something we talk about or that I say might be useful and goes without saying. Like, if anyone is, people can find me easy. Like, if they ever want to chat, if anyone feels like they're at a bottom and wants to like speak about, would be interested in hearing some of my story or the solution, just hit me up. I've done that plenty of times, speaking to other people, and it might help me more than it helps them. That's where I've been trained in recovery. I keep what I have by giving it away.
I mean, it's incredible. Being a service to others is like the antidote to deep, long introspection and getting too self-focused. It's the simplest, and I don't think it's the quickest antidote to getting out of that. Do something for somebody else.
Yeah.
Just finishing on Judgement, I think we're an incredibly judgmental society. I have been very judgmental in the past. It is something I actively try and catch myself on. I do find I'm becoming less and less judgmental by the day. It feels really good. And I realize that at the root of judgment is a feeling of inadequacy, either when we're judging other people or when we harshly judge ourselves. It's a feeling that we're not good enough, we're inadequate. And I remember at school, I grew up in Manchester. Well, I grew up in South Manchester in Cheshire. Went to school in Manchester, secondary school. Big, academically, very driven school. Big football culture in Manchester, so, who you support is a big part of your identity at school. And, everyone loved football or seemingly was into football. I don't think it's quite the same thing. But what was interesting is how judgmental we were, and I probably was, of young footballers who were caught doing all kinds of stuff in nightclubs when they were 18, 19, right? And, slapped on the front page of the Sun or the Mirror, basically just destroying these people. And then if you think about it, you think, I don't know, if you've left school, you're at 16, you're with a club, you're training all the time, you suddenly are getting 30 grand a week. I kind of challenge many people not to make a few mistakes. What has your relationship been to judgment, would you say?
I agree with what you're saying. It comes from a place, for me, I can only speak for myself, but from a place of my own low self-esteem or feelings of inadequacy. The one thing that separated me from getting clean and sober for a long time was my own judgments, exactly like you were talking about 15 minutes ago. I'm not that bad. I'm not that bad. Those young footballers that you're talking about, they've got cameras on them all the time. How many of us human beings can truly say that we've been spiritually fit 24 hours a day? I don't know anyone. I don't even know, spiritual leaders or religion. You hear story. When that story about the monk came out and he's like flying around in private jets, like smoking blunts in jets, and it's like dancers. You know what I mean? It's like wild, and like a phrase I really love is like, but for the grace of God, there go I. And I use the word God with a small g, but like, that's me, you know, the seconds and inches, you know, like of causing chaos and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think a lot of young kids, man, like if they had cameras on them all the time, filming, and then they had that one inappropriate joke they made, or that one stupid decision they'd made, or that one awful thing that they'd done, filmed, written in bold capitals and slapped on the front of the Sun, then everyone would be under the bus. You know, and that's not to excuse anyone's harmful behaviors, my own included, but I think like love is a way forward, and with time, forgiveness, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but like I know in my life when like, and I won't mention names, but there are people like family stuff where I feel like people have done like serious harms to me in the same way that I have to other people, and like until I'm willing to like try and see it from a higher perspective, I'm just in a cage, you know, and that's a big thing. And, you know, for people in recovery, like I cannot afford resentments or judgment, because if I'm in a space of resentfulness or judgmentalism, the sunlight of the spirit is blocked, and I'm wrapped up in myself again, right back in the middle of my life. And I've got 15 years of field research that tells me that my self-reliance and me running purely on my own power leads me to the doors of a treatment center feeling suicidal, having burnt down my life. You know, my self-reliance has failed me in that respect, and I need to quit playing God. You know what I mean?
Let's talk about recovery, because, you know, as you say, you're over 3 years clean, and, you know, there's a real authenticity speaking to you, which I love, and I've got to be honest, I find quite rare these days. You know, you come to my house, we've had a drink of water, sparkling water, just to be clear, and you know, a hot drink as well, and we've been chatting, and I have been struck by your humility, your gratitude, your authenticity. I really have. It's been a really lovely energy to be around.
Thanks, same to you.
And, you know, is that something that was there pre-recovery, or do you feel that is something that recovery has given you?
I don't believe that anyone is born like sinful or evil or defective or nasty. I think there were probably, you know, I believe that deep down in every, you know, man, woman, and child, or however anyone chooses to identify, that there's the fundamental idea of good or God or spirit. So I think, you know, it's funny that I've met a few artists like recently I'm writing with and stuff, and they're like, oh, I met you back in the day, like 10 years ago at a festival. You sat with me, you signed my, you know, when people, occasionally, I'm not saying like, oh, everyone's saying it's amazing, but they don't, but like, I'm kind of shocked when I hear that sometimes. They're like, oh man, you were so nice to me 10 years ago. I'm like, someone's like, I met you 10 years ago. I'm like, oh my God. So I think there were parts of it, yeah, but it's definitely a practice that recovery has given me. Recovery has given me the ability to be honest and you know, and have integrity. And I don't get all those things perfect all the time, but I didn't get those things by stopping drinking and using. You know, like when I stopped drinking and using, I'm in trouble. And I got those things by picking up the solution and, you know, the process of clearing the channel between me and whatever that thing is that's been there the whole time that I was standing in the way of. I don't know if that answers your question quite.
No, it's, it does. And it's, you know, it's fascinating because All that goodness is there within all of us, and somewhere along the line we go off track, and actually a lot of what we're trying to do when we're trying to find ourselves is just kind of return back to who we already were. Patient-wise, I've been involved with lots of people who've been struggling with various addictions. I know some people really well, some good friends who have had very public battles with addiction. Rich Roll, a good friend of mine, fellow podcast host, he's been on the show 3 times, and we've spoken about his journey with alcohol.
Yeah,
and
he's a legend.
He is.
Yeah, he's a legend.
He's amazing. And what's really interesting is that I find, like, even someone like Russell Brand, who I've not had on the show yet, I hope to in the next few months.
Yeah.
But I'm struck as someone who has never been down that path. Now, I'm very clear, it doesn't mean I've not had addictions. I absolutely have.
Yeah.
But as someone who's, I guess, not hit that rock bottom in a way in terms of, let's say, alcohol or drugs, and has then had to go into a formal process of recovery, what I'm struck by is when I talk to people like you or Rich Roll, or I see Russell Brand speak, what I often see are people who really get life, who, by going so extreme in one direction, they seem to have more of a realization of what truly makes us tick and makes us happy than people who've never been to that extreme, who just sort of slightly off the edges. What goes on there that gives people these really great principles to apply in their daily life? Because I actually think we could all probably learn from them.
Yeah, I'm no expert on recovery or those beautiful 12 suggestions. But I think the thread that connects those three, me and those guys who talk about, who I love, and many people in recovery, of course, love, is like we've all, I can only speak for myself, I imagine that they might say a similar thing, is we've all been at the point of surrender and accepting that by myself, I am powerless over this thing that I'm allergic to, and that my self-reliance and self-will has failed me, and I desperately need new management. And I make that, and by new management, I don't mean, just to be clear, sorry, Mark.
You're happy with your manager?
Yeah, I love Mark. Shout out to Mark a day here. But just knowing that I need it isn't enough. I then have to, I make that contract saying, making a decision to turn my, my thoughts and my actions and my will and my life over to that place. And then, but just doing that isn't enough. I could say, like, if I said, oh, God, I'd really love a sip of coffee right now, then I don't, it'd be cool if it did, but the coffee, my cup here isn't going to like magically like come up and come into my hand. I need to do the work to like, to clear that channel and gain access to that thing that I believe has always been there. And some of that work is, you used the word, you've used a few like kind of spiritual terms, and getting honest with myself, with another person, making amends to people I've harmed, not saying sorry. I've said sorry a million times. I'm sorry, man. Amends, and then.
What's the difference?
To me, and it's only my experience, but the difference is asking for someone's forgiveness and being accountable and naming what I've done. The difference would be like, hey, X and Y, I'm sorry for that time I was an X and Y to you, or hey man, can I have a minute of your time? I deeply regret how I treated you back then. I know it was mean and nasty, controlling, judgmental. By the grace of God, it's not a behavior I'll repeat, and I'm trying to live in a way which is less destructive, and I hope you can forgive me, and I deeply apologize.
And when you do that, when you take the time to make amends like that, how much of the teaching or how much of what you're trying to apply is, I need to do that and not be attached to the outcome of that. The reason this is so important to me is I feel a lot of the time we give our power away to other people, and we become prisoners because our well-being is dependent on what other people do around us, how they interact with us, what they say when we say something to them. And I think that's very human, and I understand that. But I know in my own life, this peace and contentment that I feel these days comes from a real detachment from the outcome of what I do. Like if I was to say that to someone and they're not ready to hear it, I've still got to be satisfied and go, you know what? That's cool. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, how do you look at that?
That situation you're describing does happen regularly with me and some of the guys I'm lucky enough to work with. I've done my part. You know, I'm not God, and it would be wrong of me to kind of force those things on someone else. And sometimes, you know, I might reach out and it's very clear that someone doesn't want to hear from me, and I need to respect that and not ruin an opportunity to maybe be useful later on. But I'd say, and people are well within their right, you know, to not want to speak or not want to talk. That's absolutely fine. But my experience has been that 95% of the time, I'm amazed at how willing people are to hear something like that, or even amazed that they're like, Ben, like, what? We were 15, you know, like, or, you know. But and I need to be careful as well, not to go in and try and seek praise and adulation for, like, you know, going and sitting down with someone and being like, I'm enlightened, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm not, you know.
A couple of things there. One is that I've gone through nerves at times before you coming up, right? Because it's not really nerves, but just like an apprehension at sometimes thinking this is a health podcast, right? I want to help inspire people to live better lives. And it started off, I would talk to, experts in their field.
Yeah.
And I've branched out loads of times, but I want to branch out more and more because I feel what I want to do is take health outside the health space. Like, I think health is life. Health is everything. We take our health with us in every interaction that we do. And I feel that we learn through storytelling, we learn through other people. Every single human being has got a story that we can learn something from. Not only am I incredibly inspired by you as an artist and a songwriter, but there's always something about your warmth when you, I think, first messaged me on Instagram a couple of years ago that I liked that energy. And what you said there about trying to make amends rather than saying sorry, I think I'm always trying to think, how's this relevant to someone who doesn't feel they're an addict? But I really see a parallel in relationships where, let's say, I don't know, two partners, husband, wife, whatever, where there's a bit of friction and you're trying to make an apology. But if the apology doesn't go down the way you want it to, it's not worth trying.
Yeah.
This is so common, these little traps that people fall into. Yeah. I have fallen into them in the past. But when you can kind of break free from that, and I think that it's those words, honesty and integrity. Because when you're acting with honesty and integrity, it actually doesn't matter what the outcome of that is, as long as what does honesty and integrity mean to you?
Feeling like I've done my part, without trying to manipulate or control the outcome. And that has come from a place of true surrender and, like, accountability. That's the best I can do. I'm not in songs, I'm all right with language, but when I'm speaking, I find it hard to, like, I don't know what the definition is of those words. I know how they feel in my system. Like it'd be like, I don't know. What's a good example? And man, I'm no angel, progress, not perfection. I'm not a saint. I'm trying to grow along, lines that that might be useful to me and to other people. But I'll give you an example, and I've shared about this in meetings. Being back, and this is something I've done in sobriety. You know, I'm not just getting sober doesn't mean that I'm switched on. You know, I need to follow those things and, you know, pick up those tools one day at a time. Being backstage at a festival and going up to an artist that I don't hate them, but I'm not obsessed with them, and being like, man, like, I love the music. Do you know what I mean? Like that subtle dishonesty. Or being at a soiree, and you know what, London, you know, you're at the Soho House or Ned, and he's like, yo, Rongan. It's like, yo, like, you know, and there's like famous people there and presenters, and, you know, someone like, they've got money or whatever, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff, and being like, hey, you know, like that when I get home after those things, I feel icky because I've been dishonest. If I've gone up to someone and been like, man, like, I love your new record, you know, and it's like, it's not something I do as much anymore, but I'm capable of that stuff without checking myself. You know what I mean? Like, kind of.
Mate,
do you know what I'm saying?
Mate, I think you just gave the best example ever for me. It's something I think I've done in the past. And the thing is, you can't hide from yourself.
Yeah, literally.
That's the truth about this. You can't hide. You can do that stuff, and it can seem okay. But, you know, when you're sitting alone, you know that you've done something that's not in alignment with who you are.
Yeah, totally.
And I think when I think of honesty, I think of, you know, this kind of radical honesty with yourself. It's that honesty with yourself. You're like, you know what? If you've got weaknesses you're trying to work on, don't try and kid yourself as much as possible that you don't have them. Accept them, acknowledge who you are, but then also try and show up in the world as a respectful, humble human being. But by showing up in the world a certain way doesn't mean you've sorted all that stuff out. And this is something I've been wrestling with over the last few months as and I was telling you before, I've just submitted the first draft of my next book. I mean, this is the most raw, personal, and I think it's the most honest. And I think it's the best book I've ever written. Like, I cannot wait for this to come out.
Amazing.
Because I think it really is my passion project, what I've been wanting to say for years, but maybe didn't feel comfortable enough in my own skin. Still try and be the doctor. You know, what should a doctor sound like? Do you know what I mean? And it's a term that I've been thinking about and been writing about. And I'm bringing it up because I kind of feel something you said, that even when you're mentoring young artists, or, you know, what the example you shared about this kind of fake praise to someone, hey man, I really love your work, even though you don't need to say that. You could just say, hey, how's it going? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And performative authenticity, right? We're thinking about the word authenticity, and I've been thinking about this whole concept of, particularly around social media, I think there is a performative authenticity sometimes on social media. It's so hip and cool to be authentic that I think we have totally misrepresented the word. So, and I think people are doing this without even realizing it. They're sort of minimizing sometimes privilege, sort of over-exaggerating sort of insecurities and weaknesses. And I was chatting to my wife about this last week when I was just finishing off this bit. I was trying to chew over a few ideas, and we were basically just saying that, or the conclusion was, I actually think it's very, very hard to be authentic on social media. I think the platform, it celebrates inauthenticity, but I really feel that the danger is that you start to change that photo a little bit because you look a little bit better, right? This is quite an extreme example because we all do that to a certain degree. But once you start doing that, or you start to tell a vulnerable story that's not really the truth, but it's what the platform wants, and you see this everywhere, then the problem is that you get love and validation for a person who you're not. And therefore, you're incentivized to keep portraying that person online, but meanwhile, inside there's a little shell of a person. And I was chatting to someone yesterday about this, who literally, high-profile influencer, opening up, won't say who it is, just saying, yeah, my life online, I know it looks as though I'm having a whale of a time, but my life is broken.
Yeah.
And you think, how many of us are looking at people like that? And I don't know. I'm fully articulating my thoughts on that, but I don't know what you would say to any of that.
I can only speak for myself, but I think living and dare I say even monetizing a dishonest representation of oneself, which I have done before, will slowly eat your soul. Because like you say, you got nowhere to, even when you get home, even if you get home, you're in a £1 million bed in a $100 million mansion, you're lying in bed and there's nowhere to hide. But inside, there's that voice inside going, you're really pulling that, you can't escape it. You can't escape that spirit, it's just like, I'm here and I love you, but like, what are you doing, Ben? Do you know what I mean? Like, I do that, yeah, it's like editing pictures and stuff. I mean, everyone does it, but it's, there's a lot of sick people, me included, like just kind of,
Yeah.
I hope that kind of stuff, I feel like it's starting to get into its death roll, and I'm lucky enough to work with like young, 19, 20-year-old artists who are right at the front of that social media, very credible, extremely gifted, kind young humans, and they're so inspiring to be around, man. They're like so on top of this stuff and aware of it.
That's awesome.
They're almost like post cancel culture. Do you know what I mean? They're like post self-obsession or something, like they're so I'm like, this was not the way 10 years ago. They're so fresh and hardworking and kind and compassionate and gifted, and yes, in the artistic communities we're generally all kind of like, left-leaning, but they don't get into the hatred and the judgment that so many people can get into, which for me, when I'm in a place of judgment, when I'm on that throne, it's like it's a cold seat.
For someone like yourself, whose debut album blew up, okay, you're 5 days off, you're 7 days off the release of your fifth album.
I think it's fourth, and like a few EPs.
Okay, so fourth album.
Yeah.
Let's compare and contrast. Ben 10 years ago, 1 week before Last Smoke Before the Snowstorm comes out. Ben today, 1 week before To Carry a Whale comes out. What is the difference? You fundamentally seem to have changed so many aspects of who you are and how you show up in the world. So how does that relate to such a big moment, or a significant moment, I should say?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that I'm more awake. This time 10 years ago, I was probably backstage at a festival, drunk or on drugs and not awake, not really bothered. A big difference that I feel is like I'm more in love with songs. Like I've always loved songs and been in love with it and kind of been addicted to music in a way, but I feel way more in love with like songwriting and more here for it. I remember being like 1 or 2 days clean sober, being like, oh my God, I'll never be able to write a song again. But my experience has been that I feel like I've become a better songwriter, a better listener, more empathetic around artists, more grateful to learn from them, even if they're at the start of their journey. I'd say I'm just more awake. But it's funny I think artists will relate to this, but it's funny with releasing an album, like to everyone else it's new, but to me it's like a year old. You must have that with books. Right? It's like I'm already writing for the next one. Do you know what I mean? I've already got a Dropbox folder of songs and bouncing them with my manager, and I'm grateful to put it out to the world, and I know it's part of the kind of game of the music industry, and I'm really proud of it. And the difference is I was more awake for the creation of this album as well. Like me and my producer, Get Cape, Wear Cape, Fly, like we left no stone unturned, like I know other humans who worked on the album as well who are too many to mention, but they're incredible, and I'm eternally grateful to them. We were really focused. We were like, I want to be a 10-track album. It's going to be called To Carry a Whale. It's going to be about living with this thing that I live with, and that it's heavy, but it's also, it's kind of like a beautiful thing to be aware of. And we got rid of a lot of like big-ish, whatever that means, songs that like publishers loved and stuff from the albums. It wasn't true to the message of this. It didn't make sense in the thematically in the context of the album. Man, you know what a capo is on the guitar? Where you
I do.
So like me and Sam, Get KP, produced the album. We spent literally days recording the same song. And I was like, no, the capo's wrong. We did it all, recorded the drums, guitar, vocal, like move the capo down to 4, move it up to 7. You know, we were like...
To suit your voice or to suit the tonality of the song?
Mainly to suit my voice, which really is like the feel of the song. And that 10 years ago was something that my reaction to Sam and myself suggesting we got this wrong, let's go again, would have been, no. Don't bother. Wait, I'd rather go outside and chill, do my own thing. You know, that extra, that awakeness and kind of respect and love for the music and to get it just right. Because I told myself this myth as a young artist, which is like, songs just land in your lap, it's all God, man, it's all chill, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to be sat here on my bed writing a song. And once or twice I've had songs land like that. But the most part is like, I've realised recently, like, starting to love the craft part of it as well. Sitting with a verse and going, let's change the chord at the end of the verse, or that one lyric, is it but or is it cause? You know what I mean? Like the little twists and turns that then when you listen to the whole piece, it's like, oh, it makes a difference. You know what I mean? I'm you know, the difference. I'm sorry, all that you know, like it wouldn't have sounded if I apologize. You know what I mean? It's a different thing. The willingness to like stare it down and like, and listen to other artists and not think that just because I've toured for longer or I've had more success or less success than someone or whatever, that, man, and honestly, I learn more from like 16-year-old kids who've just been signed, who I'm lucky enough to write with and learn from, than I do with megastars. Because they don't know, and they just, it's all feel.
Yeah.
It's all that thing we were talking about in the context of recovery, like that thing deep down in every man, woman, and child, or however anyone identifies, that fundamental idea, that juice, you know. And for some people that comes out with songs or creating an equation, or being an amazing single parent, or being a teacher or a doctor, scientist, whatever, cleaner, you know, that the thing where it's like, oh my God, I loved it. I love like just sitting with you and having a coffee before we get into whatever we're going to do.
Yeah, there's a certain freshness, isn't there, when people haven't been, I guess, jaded by the industry and not got stuck into a rut of doing things, which, you know, we can do. It must be lovely to, well, I imagine working with 16-year-olds is helpful for you as a songwriter.
Yeah.
But I imagine it's pretty helpful as a human being as well.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like fresh, and like often like that I've, you know, their parents like come with them to studio, which is awesome. And it's like nice to meet people, and I have much to learn, man. You know, I'm not God.
Can you over tinker? Like, so you've got a song and it's pretty good, and then moving around with the capo to get the right tone in your voice, to get the message right. You know, do you, I guess I'm asking because I struggle when I'm writing to know at what point is it, okay, we're done. And I'll tell you, for me, deadlines have been critical.
Yeah.
Because I know, okay, the book's going to print now. This is the best I can do at this time. What I say to, you know, I speak to a lot of younger authors who sort of hit me up for advice, and I, actually, what do we think of this? I don't know if I've told the story on the show before, but I remember when Bono was interviewed after, it's the Pop, was it Pop or Pop Mart? I can't remember what it was called now. The Pop Mart album, sort of, you know, in the early 90s. And it was maybe a year after it came out, and he was interviewed about it, and he said, listen, the album wasn't ready, but the tour had already sold out. We had the world tour, so the album just had to go out. And had we released it a year later, it would have been a completely different album, because all of those songs evolved on tour, and they actually properly formed on tour, but we just had to put it out. And I always thought about, I used to be, well, I still am, but I used to, you know, obsess about music. I'd get albums, I'd be listening all the time, I'd be reading CD booklets, getting Q magazine, like the works.
Yeah.
And I found that really helpful, because I thought, okay, look, this is art. You don't, just because you've sent the book off to print, doesn't mean your thought process has stopped. It still continues. The minute after you send that email and it goes on to print, it's still working. But if I didn't have a deadline, I think I could work on a book for 5 years. And so for me, I found these deadlines really, really helpful, just to get that balance where it's good enough, because you can, you know, with you, I mean, how do you feel about this? You can always change a song, right? You can always add something or take something out or play.
Yeah, I think yes, in answer to your question, yes, one can overtinker, and it often happens that, the day one, I work with a wonderful, I won't know names, but amazing, very seasoned producer a lot of the time, and his day one, if we work with an artist, what he sends at the end of the day at 8 p.m, it's always amazing. And then if he plays with it more, sometimes it's not as good, because it's just, when it's just feel and it's just like, yeah, I'm just trusting my instincts here and bouncing on this sonic or bouncing on the track, it's beautiful. So yeah, I think you can overtinker. I mean, you can always, I feel like the artist thing is that you're never really 100%, at least I'm never really 100% content with something. But my general rule is like, do I, especially being awake, do I really feel like this is as good as it could be? Do I feel like I've sung it in a surrendered fashion? Do I think like the sounds are as good? Do I think the tempo is right? Do I think the key is right? One thing I say a lot in the studio is like, if someone sings in front of me, I'm like, I believe you. You know what I mean? I believe that. That's amazing. I totally believe you. You can see if you turn on the TV and you see someone singing a song or doing a dance or whatever, you can tell even if someone's not got amazing voice, if they sing it like their life depends on it and they believe in it, it's like, I'm in. Plenty of people don't have amazing. I don't think I've got plenty of people I work with. I don't think have amazing voices, but they know how to use it and have it come from here as opposed to here.
Yeah, authenticity, right? It's what we connect to. It's one of the reasons I feel that long form podcasting is doing so well all over the globe. In a culture where people say no one's got time, the evidence suggests otherwise.
Yeah.
You've got Joe Rogan putting 3-hour plus podcasts out, biggest show in the world. Tim Ferriss, Rich Roll, this podcast is doing very well.
Yeah, congrats.
With long form.
Yeah.
And I think something you touched on there is that over a 2-hour conversation, you can't fake it, right? You can fake it, and on a 3-minute live telly interview, you can fake it. You can say the right things. You can give the sound bites.
Yeah.
90 minutes, 2 hours, people will see right through it. So I feel, like I've said before, I think long form conversation is one way to change the world. I really do, because I think it's the modern day campfire.
I love that. I've not heard that before. That's great. Yeah, modern day campfire. I like that.
Where we can really just have these human conversations. But I think what you're speaking to there is authenticity. It's not necessarily the person with the best voice. It's the one who can connect the most. And that speaks to what you were talking about. I think in recovery, you talk about other people, being in service. One quote I've written down of yourself was, you've said before that a dangerous place for you to be is when you think you can do everything by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think my mind is a dangerous neighborhood to hang out in by myself. You know what I mean? It just like, I can get so caught in self and wrapped up in self. And my experience shows me that 15 years of running on self and thinking, Ben, I got this, and putting myself right in the middle of my life, being all wrapped up in myself, ended up in just continual heartbreak for me and those people around me, and that is not to say I'm always free of that now, but it's, I'm human, but it's less by not trying to manipulate and control and run the show myself. I mean, I'm no longer playing the director, casting everyone around and saying, go here, go here, go here, go here. I'm just like, what will be will be. It might not be. It's not going to be on my time, but that's okay.
Given that you've been sober for 3 years now, and given how important being around with, connecting with other people is, have the last 15 months of these distancing restrictions, how have they been for you, and has it made recovery even more challenging?
That's a great question. I think I'm aware that through my own privilege and luck and success in music that I've felt the nipper less than like most of the world did. You know, I was able to be in a place of comfort and in my home, and for that I'm, you know, grateful and privileged. And it wasn't as challenging as I thought it'd be. The community moved onto Zoom. The community of kind human beings who share their common solution with me, you know, one day at a time, and who I help occasionally, all moved onto Zoom. And I know people personally, people I've been texting when I was on the train today who hit their rock bottom in the pandemic and got sober on Zoom by being broken enough to follow suggestions. And also, you know, it can be nerve-wracking for someone to walk into a church basement or a community hall or whatever the place might be. You know, on Zoom, you know, everyone's got different opinions on this, and I'm no expert on recovery or on music or on health or medicine or anything, but I've seen people come in and get sober on Zoom, broken enough to like let go of their own ideas and follow suggestions. And some of those people are my closest friends. I was texting a friend of mine in Nashville before I came on here, and I'm looking forward to when stuff goes back face to face, you know. But the recovery road that I'm on is very democratic, and stuff is done by group conscience and vote and nothing. There's no leader or no dues to pay or fees to pay, or there's no like God, you know what I mean? Like there's no, by God I mean like there's no like figure who's like, I am the boss of this place, you know. It's all like everyone's got a voice, and we constantly speak about when it's right and appropriate to go back into in-person gatherings. And you know, and it's in some of the stuff, you know, a few in-person things have started to open up, and the kindness I see is incredible, you know. So obviously when it's a lot of time in London, I don't know whether government restrictions are out with stuff, but it's like only 15 people can be in a room. Well, what happens if 15 people who have got 20 years clean and sober go to a room to meet to engage in recovery, and a newcomer who's drunk comes outside the meeting? Are they going to get turned away? And that would never happen, you know, because I've seen old timers be in meetings and a newcomer comes and there's not space for them. The old timer walks out and go, you take my seat, you're more important here. That's incredible. Do you know what I mean? So there's stuff to discuss with like when we're going to go in person or not, but you know, I'm no expert. In answer to your question, I've actually started going to spending more time in and around. I already spent a lot of time there, but I can go every day, 24 hours a day. I could go if I wanted, you know. It's incredible. And Zoom, you know,
Yeah.
we can get stuff done. I miss the kind of smell of coffee and, you know, like the kind of romance of meeting spaces. But you know, we're trying to be we're trying to follow rules and not play God anymore, and not do exactly what we wanted to do, you know, for me at least, which is do exactly what I wanted to do regardless of if it harmed other people. And, you know, people in recovery working an honest path, hopefully are out of the business of putting themselves in the middle of their own lives.
It sounds like a key skill that one learns in recovery is compromise. Is that fair to say?
I've not heard that word before in that context, but I think for me at least, a key skill is accepting that I'm not always right. My idea isn't always the best, and that you know, a group of recovering alcoholics and addicts together is a powerful, powerful force. You know, I went to doctors and therapists and scientists and all people I look up to and respect, as does everyone in the recovery community, you know, God-given, important, gifted, selfless people. But no, I don't think, I don't know about compromise, but I think just knowing that like us together is more important than me getting my own way, you know. So if the group, or if a collection of humans in recovery think we're going to not go in person for a while, but I want to go in person, then I guess compromise might be the right word. Okay, you know, There were 10 of
Yeah.
us in this room. 8 of us said, let's chill on Zoom for a bit. And 2 of us wanted to go in. Let's hear the minority voice because it's important and it's right to do so. But this is what we're going to do. I need to get up. I'm out of the business of putting my hands on the wheel and, driving my car into the side of the mountain.
This is what I was getting at before. I think these lessons that I hear from people who have been in recovery, there just seems to be these universal lessons that we could all benefit from. When you said there, well, I've learned that I'm not always right and that sometimes someone else has got a better opinion or whatever than me. I don't know that there's a single human being out there who couldn't do with hearing that and being reminded of that, myself included. Do you know what I mean? I really feel there's something about when the pain's so bad, people learn the real truths of life. And I've heard some people who are in recovery say that it was the best thing that ever happened to them and they learned so much from it and they wouldn't have it any other way, which is really powerful when you hear that.
I agree with that.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, people use like to say people think, if someone doesn't really understand it, might think people are nuts, but like you'll hear like, I'm a grateful alcoholic or I'm a grateful addict, those kind of sayings a lot. And, I needed I needed the harms that I caused and the harms that I did to myself and every drink I ever had to get to that point, and in my case, every drug as well, to get to that point of surrender, just like my self-reliance is failing me here. I will fail to manage my own life. I cannot stop when I want to. I cannot stay stopped once I'm stopped. Once I start, I have little control over the amount I take. And I'm failing at playing God and being the director of the show. I'm just grateful to be where I am, and I'm not an expert. I don't think it's for everyone. I have no monopoly on recovery, and hopefully something I say might be useful. But sometimes people are only in your life for a reason or for a season, right? And it is hard sometimes. Like think like, oh God, we were in love, or like I miss that person and that's done. If only we could know each other now. I'm different, that can be a little tricky to accept that they're probably people who I'm in love with, or have a big love for in my heart that I probably won't see and may not see or speak to again in this life. But I have to remember that like I'm no longer running the show, and I trust that there's a bigger plan for me. And like as soon as I try and get my hands all over it and manipulate and like I'm just all my experience shows me that is not good for me, but I forget that.
You've used the term God a few times in our conversation. Another term that I've really enjoyed hearing is spiritually fit. And I'm interested in how you would see yourself. Are you religious? Are you spiritual? How do those things fit together for you?
I definitely don't think I'm spiritually fit 24 hours a day.
What does it mean, being spiritually fit?
For me, it means being out of the way of myself, being willing to trust that there's a greater plan for me, and to not put my hands all over it, to not be in the business of judgment, to not be in the business of manipulation and control, to not be in the business of dishonesty. I believe that there's a God. I'm not religious. I'm not a member of any organized like religion. That isn't for me. If it works for many people, it's not something that currently I'm in or around. But there have been too many coincidences and seconds and inches moments, or what I would call God shots in my life. Right person, right time, right place, right time. For me to not believe, and the one thing that, I've done consistently since the last time I was drunk or high was hit my knees each morning and just to ask for help, and I choose to use the word God, but I've been lucky that I've been taught that it's a God of my own understanding, and my God is not everyone else's God, and my God would probably get another alcoholic drunk, and their God would probably get me drunk, and there are all kinds of people in the places that I go to, and I've sat in meetings of recovering alcoholics. Next to, on one side of me I got a single mother, the other side of me I got an Orthodox Jew, the other side of me I got an ex-pimp, I got a Muslim next to me in a hijab, and they're my friends. Like, I don't care just because they might believe something different to me or whatever. Like, we're all there for that common solution, and it's really beautiful, and I have much to learn from those people. My experience is that the religion of my childhood blocked me from the God that I know now, because so much of it was man-made.
Wow.
And again, my truth is not everyone else's truth, and I have many friends who have, the practice organized religion. That's okay, and it can be very helpful and very beautiful to many people. But no, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm religious, but I believe in God.
I love the term energy that keeps coming up in this conversation. I think the energy, the intention behind how we speak, what we say, I think it's everything. I think it's everything. I remember the very first message you sent me on Instagram. I looked at it this morning.
Oh, really? What did I say? How long ago? Was it like 5 years?
No, it was 2018 or 2019.
Okay.
And I was probably a bit starstruck at the time. I was like,
I think I was starstruck as well. But I think he must have followed me, and I'm like, oh my God. And my friend Michael's like, Rongan, man, he's amazing. I was talking to you about off screen. He's like, he's a doctor. And he's like, Rongan's amazing, man. So the feeling was mutual, probably.
You sent me a message saying, I love the energy of your podcast. And the slightly immature in me back then was like, oh my God, Benjamin Francis Leftwich just sent me a message. So, I've been listening to his music for years.
Yeah.
And I, it's something I'll be thinking a lot about. And I feel very humbled to be witness to this conversation, you speaking so openly about your experiences, because I know there's a lot of anonymity in the recovery community, and for those people on the outside, I've always got that sense that there's so much wisdom that we can learn from it. I really do, and something that I've, on my own journey to become a better human being and a better father and a better husband and a better doctor, is I think about honesty, integrity. I think about the energy with which I put things out into the world. Now, with a pretty sizable platform to communicate with people, I think the way I say things is actually more important than what I say.
I love that.
And it's a realization in the past few months, really, that it's about it's I do have social media platforms that I post on, even though I have grave concerns over social media and what it can do. My way of dealing with it is not spending too much time on there, but it's also to make sure that everything I post comes from a good place. I'm not going to talk down about other people. I'm not going to criticize other people. I'm not going to call people out. And I want to know, is this creating division? Is this going to bring people together? Is this going to put out compassion, kindness, and positivity? For me, that's the only thing that matters. I want to help improve people's lives the right way. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I always get there. But it's that energy piece that I think is so, so important.
I love that. I don't want to remember that. How I say something is more important than what I say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with that as well. Yeah, the energy, good energy, just non-divisive. I agree that good energy is important. And I agree that compassion and kindness and forgiveness and love are very important things. But I also know that sometimes for me, and only in my experience, sometimes people being truthful and honest with me even if it wasn't dressed up in traditional loving and compassionate language, was really kind.
Yeah.
You know, because when I'm in, or was in the business of you know, this, you know, addictive behaviors, alcoholism, I could easily go to a bookshop and pick up a book on radical acceptance, loving myself, compassioning myself. I know that's not a word, but you know what I mean. And love myself right into a bag, or right into a drink, or right into any kind of behavior. You know what I'm saying? So I have to be careful within that while yes, I agree those things are incredibly important, and you know, one of the things I've been taught in my path of recovery is that love and tolerance of others is our code. But I have to also remember in that my powerlessness over alcohol and drugs, and not think, Ben, you've really done great. Be kind. You know, 3 years into recovery, you put out an album, you're writing with all these artists, doing great. Be kind to yourself, and be compassionate to yourself, and really give yourself a treat. And go and buy a 12-pack of Red Stripe and a bag of drugs. And I will do that. And you know, I can only speak for myself, but I can be very sneaky as an alcoholic or addict. If I'm not picking up the solution that I've been taught by kind human beings in recovery, that's what I'll do. And that's what I did for 7 years, you know, reading all kinds of self-help books and all this kind of stuff. And like, for many people, self-help is a brilliant, beautiful thing. But, you know, people get caught in the language and semantics of stuff, but actually self-abandonment, there's juice there as well, in like service.
Yeah. Your third album was called Gratitude.
Yeah.
Gratitude is such a powerful emotion and sentiment.
Yeah.
And I know many people in recovery talk about this a lot. Why did you call it Gratitude?
That album was, for 90% of it was written in 2017, end of 2016 to 2017. And I called it Gratitude because I was at the moment, I hadn't got clean and sober yet, but I was at the moment of surrender and awareness that I was surrounded in grace, and I just hadn't seen it. You know, the title for that originally came from, I was on tour in the States at the end of 2016. I was on like a 2-month tour out there. I was with my friend Jake, who was on tour with me. I had a tour manager called Michelle, sound guy called Ryan, and I fell off playing in Dallas, Texas, and in a place called Deep Elm in Dallas, Texas, and I fell off. Not fell off the stage, but I was just wasted on stage. Played a show. It was fine. Went into the garden and was chain smoking cigarettes and having a drink. And I met a woman there, and I said, "Can I get you a drink?" She said, "No, I haven't drank in 5 years." I said, "Why?" She said, "I've been there and done that." And turns out she was 5 years clean. And that was prevenient grace. You know, that was someone being put in my life at a certain moment when I really was desperate and needed it, and that person carried the message to me, and we fell in love, and for a minute, and it didn't work out. But gratitude for the gratitude how it comes from those kind of moments of just like, wow, like there's hope here. There's hope here. And I probably came up with that title before that relationship ended, but the feeling is true, you know, like thank you whoever's running this show, because you're doing stuff for me that I cannot do for myself. And you won't do stuff for me that I can do for myself. You know what I mean? I was playing a show to a few people in Texas, and that thing that I believe in put someone in my path who drastically shifted the course of my life. She didn't save it, but she carried a message and a solution that saved it for sure.
Sounds like you were meant to meet her.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I'm sure maybe some people listening think that's super cheesy, but I feel like I was. I am a singer-songwriter after all.
Well, on singer-songwriting, it was interesting. Adam Duritz, the singer of the Counting Crows, certainly one of my favorite bands in the 90s.
What a band.
What a band. He was on Rogan recently, which was awesome. I've not seen it all. I just saw some of the clips on YouTube.
Cool.
But he was telling us about the story of Mr. Jones and what happened to him afterwards, because I guess I know that was a huge global scale, and I'm sure you know similar things where something just goes big and changes things sort of overnight.
Yeah.
But he said something which I thought I'd ask you. He says, life for me is awkward and uncomfortable, but not when I'm on a stage. When I'm on a stage, everything is fine.
Yeah, I totally agree with him. I was having that conversation with, I think either my manager, Mark, or someone else the other night. Maybe someone in my therapist, to be honest. I think it was the other week. And when I'm in the studio, for me, it's when I'm in the studio as well. When I'm on a stage, when I'm singing, my eyes are closed and I'm singing and my heart's in it, I'm surrendered to it, I'm believing. Or when I'm in a studio, deep in the trenches of a song with an artist that I'm lucky enough to be with and learn from, it all kind of goes away. And then the second I get into the taxi home or get the lift home or whatever, and as soon as I'm in the cab even, I'm like driving through London and I'm remembering like, oh my God, we were there and this happened there and blah, blah, blah. I get awkward and then I'm back on my sofa, kind of like very lucky to be where I'm at, but in a place of irritability, restlessness, and discontentment. And I'm so lucky to have found a solution that I can apply to that hole that we started speaking about at the beginning of this conversation. So I agree with Adam. And what a band.
You've been very conscious throughout this conversation so far about making sure that we know that this is your own personal experience. You're not trying to tell anyone else how to live or claim to be an expert in anything. It says this is just your lived experience. But I feel we all, myself included, can learn a lot through anyone's lived experience, including yours.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, to the limit you're open to sharing, what sort of things do you do on a daily basis to keep you right, to keep you spiritually fit? And then I'd love to understand what happens in 2022 when you go on the road and you're not in your sort of routine in your house or your flat, where you've got these kind of practices in place.
Yeah.
Do you need to adopt a different strategy? Have you thought about that? And do you know what that may look like?
The daily routine, again, it's different for everyone. I start my day and I read some pages from a book where I found the solution to my problem. Then I hit my knees, say a few prayers. Don't always know who I'm praying to or what I'm praying to, but it helps me. Then I normally make a coffee, sit in my garden. I read another little reading from a book that I love called Daily Reflections. And then I turn my phone on. I try not to get into industry chat and diary stuff before I'm kind of right. And I'd say minimum of 4 times a week, I go to a meeting of other alcoholics or addicts in recovery and hear them speak. Sometimes someone speaks for 20 minutes. Sometimes we go around in a circle or whatever, and I listen to them and I speak and I learn from them, and people speak about the solution. And before I get into bed at night, I hit my knees as well and thank whatever it is that's out there for another day, clean and sober. I've got into a habit recently of like praying for like friends who are like struggling with various diseases, sometimes alcoholism, sometimes medical diseases.
How does it make you feel when you do those prayers for people who are struggling?
um, more peaceful than I was before I said the prayer, and hopefully useful. I often call a man in America who takes me through the suggestions and shares with me the solution the solution that he has found and that I have found to alcoholism. Those are the things that come to mind in terms of like routine. I've toured America and Europe and UK and maybe somewhere else sober. So I can answer your second part of the question. I go to meetings of recovering or recovered alcoholics and addicts.
On the road?
Yeah, in America every night because the meetings are everywhere. And in the UK when I can. But I wouldn't leave it longer than a few days. And I listen to other people who've had similar stories, sharing their experience, strength and hope. And I just stay right in the middle of the bed with that stuff when I'm on the road. And I call others and try and help others, be of service to others, and as well as call my man in America.
Man, I've so enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you, you too.
Towards the end of this conversation now, I would just love to talk about your music. I've said it at the start, but I think it's incredible.
Thank you so much, man.
A few of my friends, it's actually one of my best mates who I told I'm speaking to you today on the podcast. He's like, no way, man, no way. He's one of his tracks is like our family favorites on our Spotify playlist. The kids, we all listen to it.
Bless him.
But, you know, your music is touching a lot of people. And I heard the two new tracks, the first one, Cherry and Tacoma. There's a couple of lines in it I love. It's always a risk pinning my happiness on a kiss, one shot wonder. I don't even know what it means, right? But I just hear it. I go on my walks and I listen. I go, I don't know what exactly he's saying, but the energy just hits me.
Yeah. Thank you, man. That's really a song about my own issues around codependency and, you know, like we speak about earlier, kind of thinking that anything I can do to not really be honest with myself, to not really look inward, you know, if I fly across the world to Tacoma and go bowling and, you know, watch a movie and sit in her garden by the Pacific that the song talks about, I'll be happy, you know, and it's a big risk because I've tried that a couple of times and I'm not yet, I haven't become enlightened.
It's kind of how we started, right? Success and happiness. We think that's going to give it to us.
Yeah. It's a risk.
It's a risk.
Yeah, a big risk.
Yeah.
You know, the insanity of across the Atlantic or the Pacific, you know what I mean? It's like left to my own devices, I'll tell myself that those kind of journeys are really wonderful ideas. And sometimes they can be, and for some people they can be, you know, but it's a song about codependency and a crazy journey to Tacoma, which I think sounds beautiful to sing.
If I look at my diary for 2022, one of the early dates I've got in is your tour. So
thank you, man.
Oh, listen, I got to say thanks again. Look,
thank you, man.
You're a week away from a big release. I can't wait for the album to come out. I hope I get to play some of these tracks on my Radio 2 show because I think they're great.
Thank you, brother.
I think your songs help people, honestly. I think your songs tell stories that people can see themselves in. And, you know, if I'm feeling down and I put on some of your music, it always... It's funny, it doesn't necessarily... in that, it's an upbeat song, lift my mood. No, it's by connecting with the emotion I'm feeling, it makes me feel, you know, you feel less alone and less isolated. You feel, there's someone else out there. You know,
Thanks, yeah.
It's incredible.
Thank you. I feel like that when I listen to music as well.
There's incredible power. And just to sort of finish off, and I'm aware you do not consider yourself an expert, but I'm going to ask this nonetheless. This is called Feel Better, Live More, because when we feel better in ourselves, we get more out of life. And so I'd love if you have any final thoughts to share with the audience over, you've been through a huge roller coaster of a journey. You're still on a journey like all of us.
Yeah.
But have you got any sort of words of, I was going to say words of wisdom, but let's take the pressure off. Have you got any thoughts that you want to share with people who feel inspired by your story and go, you know what, I can see a bit of myself in Ben. I want to start making some changes in my own life. Do you have any words you want to share with them?
Again, like you said, I'm not an expert. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Admitting powerlessness is not a sign of weakness. It's a runway to fly off into a beautiful life. If one is needing and willing to do that work, and getting around a community of people who have identified their problem and are willing to name it for what it is, accept it, surrender to it, ask for help around it, and do the work on it is not a sign of weakness. It's a beautiful thing. And my experience won't be for everyone's, and I have no monopoly on recovery or the solution. But when I accepted I was powerless, I couldn't stay stopped, and that my life was unmanageable, that was a point in which I could then progress into finding new management and clearing the channel. And thanks,
Ben. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your story. I really would urge everyone listening, watching this right now, to check out the new album, To Carry a Whale. If you like streaming, it's everywhere. If you like me and want to get the CD and the vinyl, you can do that as well. But I really do think your music moves people.
thanks.
And I hope everyone who listens to my show gives it a chance and gives it a listen. And see you on the road.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
If you want to see the recent one-on-one conversation I had with the inspirational Dr. Gabor Mate, it's a great conversation. I really think you're going to enjoy it. You can check it out right there.
But much of physical pathology can be traced to childhood experiences and how we cope with those experiences and what those experiences did